Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I just wanted to go over some of the week 3 information and then move on to week 4. So last week we talked about HIPAA. The main reason that HIPAA is so important and why we spend an entire week on it in this class is it really is the only law that impacts every single person that works in a facility. So you could be, or not even works there, but it is there doing some activity. So you could be a part-time volunteer at the front desk. You could be facilities and maintenance folks, you could be billing, health information management, finance, you could be IT, you could be a C-suite executive. Everyone had clinicians, clinical staff, everyone has to deal with HIPAA. So that's why it's so important we do spend a full week on it. Also, most people are familiar with HIPAA privacy and not so much with the security side. So that's why we do spend a fair amount of time on it in the class. So hopefully you found that to be helpful and to learn a little bit about HIPAA and kind of where we're at with it. Sadly, as you probably noticed from the discussion board, sadly there are so many organizations that still just don't have a grasp on it, are not compliant. Not every HIPAA privacy breach or HIPAA issue is related to simply an employee gone rogue and stealing information. A lot of them are rooted in the fact that we're just not good at what we're doing from a security standpoint. So it is somewhat problematic. So just to raise awareness, and hopefully you found that to be helpful. I do want to go over the quiz quick. It looked like the bulk of the questions that folks missed this week were related specifically to medical records. So why do we care about medical records? This isn't a health information management program. We're not, that's not why we're learning about these things. But what is key is that the medical record, the integrity of the medical record needs to be protected by everyone. So most of us, when we get into the healthcare setting, will have access to the record. We'll be able to see things in the record. Obviously, only what from a business perspective we need to, the minimum amount that we need. But it's really crucial that we understand a few things about the medical record. The biggest thing, and this wasn't related to an answer, but the biggest thing about the record is that we need to understand that it's a legal document. The medical record is a legal document, and therefore we need to treat it as such. Anything that goes in the record can be brought to a court of law and judged upon as a legal document. So it's crucial there. The other thing that's interesting about the medical record and as tied to its status as a legal document, you can't just take things out of it. So even if there's an error, for example, if a physician notes that someone is a female when they're male, they can't just delete female. In the days of written records, it would say, it would have said female, and then they'd have probably just crossed out the FE, but you would have been able to still see it. They would have just put a line through it. In the realm of the electronic health record, you can redact information from a record if it's incorrect, but there needs to be some indication. Typically, there'll be like a little star, or it'll be colored a different color, and when you hover over it, it'll show you what change was made. Why is this important? Well, it's crucial if you're making clinical decisions based on information that was in the record and now it's changed. So down the road, you may make a clinical decision based on lab values when maybe by mistake the lab gave you the wrong values. If you made decisions based on those values, you want those values in there redacted so you can't see them unless you go to look at them. Because what if perhaps you're brought up on case of negligence, malpractice, based on the fact that you didn't act on maybe a cancer diagnosis or something like that when you never received that information as the provider. So it's crucial that we keep that information in there because we are making decisions based on that information. So just a few tidbits on the medical record. The questions that we had, the first one was, which of the following statements is true regarding medical record entries? So typically folks were choosing one of the top two if they didn't get it right. So they should be written within 7 days of observing a patient's deteriorating condition or within 21 days. Typically 7 days, even 7 days is going to be too long. You need to be making medical record entries as soon as possible. typically an organization will have a policy. So, for example, the facility that I worked at last had a policy that outpatient medical record entries had to be made within 48 hours of the visit, and inpatient medical record entries had to be made at the time of service. So the physicians would see the patient and then they would go and sit down and type in their medical record entry, or they would dictate and send for transcription. So that had to be done at that time. Why was there a difference? Well, because in the inpatient setting, those providers are making decisions. Other providers are seeing those patients, and those providers are making decisions based on what's going on with the patient. It's important for that to be a real-time document that people know what's going on. If you go in to see the patient, you order a new medication, and you don't put in the record why you've ordered it, other physicians may be confused as to why you're ordering it, or maybe you're not even entering the order, so then the patient's not getting the med. So that's why it really needs to be done in real time. We give them a little bit more time on the outpatient side, just because oftentimes, they may do all their dictation at night or all of their entries at night, so they can have that little bit of extra time. But getting into a habit of doing things as soon as possible, many physicians will they'll see the patient and they'll do their documentation right in the record at the same time, or they'll walk out of the room, they'll dictate the note, and then go into the next patient's room. So whatever needs to be done is fine, as long as it's information is in the record as soon as possible. The correct answer here was they should be legible to read. So you might think, well, what difference does that make? It's typically going to be typed. Well, not always. There are still, especially in the inpatient side, there are a lot of forms that are handwritten. So those end up getting scanned into the electronic health record, but they need to be legible. So that's always been a problem with medical records. Having legible entries always been a huge problem. Next question. Integrity and completeness of the medical record are important in reconstructing the events surrounding an alleged negligence or criminal act in the care of a patient where the medical record something. So aids in police investigations, yep, that's correct. Aids in determining the cause of death, yep, we could use a medical record for that. Provides information in workers' comp cases and personal injury proceedings. Yep, use medical records for those things. So we really need them, all of those things, we need it to be complete and have a high level of integrity, meaning that the information that is in there is accurate and complete. So our correct answer here is all of these are correct. I will say, and I ask you to please be sure that you're reading all answers. The thing that I find with all of these are correct, or select all that apply types of answers, is people miss them because they get to this first one and they're like, oh, yep, aids in police investigations, that's got to be it, and then they click it and move on. You really need to always answer, or you need to read all of your answers before you move on to that next question. Last one. The persistent failure to conform to a medical staff rule requiring physicians to complete records promptly can be the basis for. So our correct answer here is limitations based on or suspension of medical staff privileges. So oftentimes, like I mentioned previously, you're going to have policies and facilities that say that records need to be completed within X amount of time. A lot of times that policy will live within the medical staff bylaws because that's what governs the activity of the medical staff. Medical staff meaning all of the physicians and providers that have privileges to work in your organization. Sometimes they work for you, like for example UPMC is a good example in that they have a large group of physicians that are UPMC physicians. So they obviously have, the majority have medical staff privileges at the various facilities. However, there are also private physicians in town that will refer patients to UPMC facilities, and those private physicians may also have privileges at your organization, at your hospital, so that they can come in and see their own patients. So that's what the medical staff is, kind of that population of people, of clinicians that see patients in your facility. But you have to give them privileges. They have to go through a process called credentialing, where they, everyone will, there'll be a credentialing coordinator, everyone will submit their information, their licensure information, any fellowships, board certifications, Medicare numbers, other insurance numbers, all of that kind of stuff, and it'll all be verified by a credentialing coordinator to make sure you are who you say you are. It's much like getting a job, except You don't get a job. You just get to see patients there. And then it will go from there to add you to the medical staff. If a provider is not following those bylaws, they are not doing the things that they say they're going to do when they come to see patients in the facility, you can have your access limited, or you can have your access removed. And that's what that first answer is talking about there. So the other options, assuring medical staff privileges. No, we certainly would never assure someone privileges if they weren't doing their record documentation. Sanctions by the planning board. They may receive sanctions, that's what that first bullet is, but not by the planning board. Planning board is involved in strategic planning. And then the department director completing the records of those physicians who fail to do them. That would be completely inappropriate. The provider that saw the patient needs to do those records. So that's it. Those are our questions. Let's hop back over to the Blackboard shell so we can see this week. So this week, kind of shift your mind from law to ethics. So we're making that shift. So when we're looking at questions, we're getting away from the black and white and more into all of those shades of gray. Now I will say, and we talk about ethics and morals, and it is discussed in the textbook, but everyone has their own, what I always say, moral compass. So there's like one side is very liberal thought base, the other side is very conservative thought base, and this is not a politics related thing. You can have a very liberal moral compass, but be the most conservative Republican in the world. So it's not your moral compass is about your thoughts of what's right and what is wrong. And I think the other thing to think about is that we're not always one or the other. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. So there are some things that I may think are right that other people think are wrong, or that I might think is okay to do that others are like, oh my gosh, no, I would never do that. And then vice versa. There may be things that you think are great to do and you feel very comfortable doing them, and I would be like, oh my gosh, no, I would never, that would be completely against my morals to do something like that. So it's very much a personal decision, and we're not passing judgment on anybody for these things. That's not our purpose here at all. So when you're discussing things, just keep in mind that, like for example, we have our discussion this week about organ donation. Other people may have different thoughts on organ donation than you. Just be respectful of their thoughts, and hopefully people will be respectful of your thoughts. And this is really about reflect upon your own personal ethics and morals for these types of things. So our discussion is all about organ transplantation or organ donation, both on the donor side and the recipient side. Our assignment this week is about this video. So click on this link here to get to the video. It's out on YouTube. It's about that video, and it's about stem cell research. So think about stem cell research, and specifically this video is about kind of a medical tourism aspect that's becoming very popular, where people are going to other areas to receive healthcare outside of the United States. But in this case, it was really a fraudulent activity on behalf of the provider down there. So think about that, and think about stem cell treatment overall, and then also think about what is going on in this case. Why the fact that we are not doing stem cell work, a lot of it here in the United States, is creating situations like that. So that's all I have. Hopefully you'll enjoy this week. And remember, like I said, make that shift into ethics away from law. And then we'll try and bring the two back together toward the end of the course. We're actually already toward the end of the course. The end of this week, we'll be halfway. So end of the course will be here before we know it. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And otherwise, I will see everyone in the discussions. Thanks.